This week marks 5 years since Lauren McCluskey, who's a University of Utah student. She was on scholarship at the U as a member of the track team. She was murdered by a man she dated just briefly. In a moment, I'm grateful to her mom, Jill, who will be joining us to discuss what's been done since Lauren's murder on the University of Utah campus to protect women from violence and what she thinks still needs to be done.
And how much things have changed at the University of Utah. We'll hear more specifics of what they've done to protect women. But this was a complete and total failure by the university's police, the university leadership. And since then, the University of Utah has been through a couple of police chiefs. They've been through a couple of university presidents that have changed over the time. So sometimes when you have so much change, my worry is, did something get lost? When you don't have people that were directly affected or part of that tragedy, are they still committed in the way that they need to be to the changes that were so necessary?
And let's remember, the man who murdered Lauren, she'd found out that he was lying to her about a lot of different things, including she also found out that he was a registered sex offender, and she broke things off. And then she's getting stalked. She's getting strange messages,
extorted.
Right? She's feels like she's being lured to meet up, and then she calls police. To your point, Dave, for help, and she gets passed from department to department, and we're hopeful that things have changed for the sake of other women. And even for men who may end up in a relationship where they feel like their intimate partner, is turning on them and has the potential to become violent.
But as they were investigating and trying to figure out what happened, things just moved too slowly. The danger caught up, and she was murdered. And it was a national news story, so tragic. Joining us right now is Jill McCluskey, Lauren's mother. Thank you so much for joining us, Jill. And I have to say, tell you how grateful I am. This obviously was the worst moment of your life, the darkest moment of your life. And here we are 5 years later, and you're still willing to talk about this. Why are you willing to do that?
Well, two reasons. One, that it brings attention to the issue. When Lauren was murdered, I was not fully aware of the dangers of dating violence and stalking, and so I continue to lend my voice to this cause, and it also is important to me to do some good in Lauren's name, to keep her name alive, and keep her light shining among other people, but just to make a positive difference that helps me in my own grief.
Jill, I know you sent your daughter away from home on scholarship. On scholarship to the University of Utah, nowhere near where she grew up, nowhere near where you and her dad, your husband live. And here she is in a strange city to her. And I always felt like it was just a horrible failure on so many levels. And it's still so emotional for us here as well, and I'm just hopeful. My fingers are crossed that you're going to tell us that you feel like there's been a movement in the right direction at the University of Utah to protect other women from dating violence. But what have you witnessed?
Yeah. First of all, we came back for a campus safety race and walk in remembrance of Lauren. We had about 175 people run in the race for Lauren, and a number of the athletic teams came out and supported. We just feel so much love from the community and support from the community in Salt Lake. I feel like there have been some excellent changes. We've always felt support from Taylor Randall, the current and new president, and then we've been so impressed by Keith Squires, who's the vice president for for public safety, and he was one of the people who was one of the outside investigators to find out what went all the failures in Lauren's case and made all those recommendations about what they needed to do. But he came in and he told me the only reason that he wanted to work for the U was to make changes and make it better, so that would never happen again. And I know he's authentic in that, and he has made so many changes, from hiring victim advocates and having them on staff. He and I have both participated in a victim-informed policing training that is being done online. It comes out of South Carolina, but he's really committed to making a difference on the policing side.
As you have looked back, and I know you've examined every aspect of your daughter's murder, where was the biggest failure, and where have you seen the change in the way the University of Utah and the police department are handling cases similar to Lauren's?
Yeah, definitely the biggest failure was in the policing, and that I feel like they didn't have training and policy, so they didn't even look up her murderer's parole status, because that could have put him away right there, and it wouldn't have happened if that. Stalking a young woman is definitely a violation of his parole, but so the policing definitely was a huge failure, but also housing had a huge failure also, in that they didn't have regularly scheduled meetings. They didn't communicate with the police. I feel like in the most recent death of Zhidong Fong, who happened, the student who was murdered 2 years after Lauren was murdered, housing knew about it but didn't report it to police. So that's something where there continues to be some concern that there is communication across entities.
I was going to ask you about what area the university still needs to improve upon, and would you suggest that one critical area is that the RAs in the housing units make sure they're communicating to police and police are communicating with them on a regular basis?
Yeah, I think that's one of the most important things, that there needs to be trust and communication across entities. That there's a coordinated response across campus.
Jill McCluskey, thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing your story. I know it's ripping the scab off of a horrible experience every time you bring this up, but I know you're doing it to protect others, and I'm grateful. It's a service. It's a great act of charity, and we thank you for joining us.
Yeah, and I if you missed that conversation with Jill McCluskey, the mother of University of Utah student Lauren McCluskey, who was murdered 5 years ago this week on campus by a man that she had dated briefly, who then turned and stalked her and just did all kinds of horrible things to torment her up until the time he dragged her through that parking lot and then murdered her in the back of a car. I really feel like this story it needs to resonate with all of us here in Utah, and remind every one of us that it is so important that when anybody comes to us and says, I am having an issue with an intimate partner, that we react appropriately.